Yeah. All right. Welcome, everyone. While folks are kind of getting organized, let's come in and have a seat. Welcome to this wonderful event, From Color to Black, the stories of North Central Florida. So we're in for a real treat, and I've been asked to welcome everyone. My name is Paul Ortiz. I'm the director of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program here at the University of Florida. I want to thank the Harn Museum for being such a wonderful host. Let's give the Harn a round of applause. The amazing performance you're about to see is based on years of oral histories with African American elders in cities like Gainesville, St. Augustine, the Panhandle, all throughout Florida. Director Jeffrey Pafal has been working with our students this semester, and you're in for a real treat. I just want to mention that we have an ongoing oral history project at UF Oral History. Some of you have already given me your cards. We love to interview folks. Everyone has a story to share, right? Okay, so please talk with us during or actually after the program, and we'll be happy to take your names. We always want to build our connections. And again, on behalf of the Oral History Program, thank you so much for being here today, and I will turn the floor over to Jeffrey Pafal. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming this afternoon. I would like to introduce our first author, Namiko Miller, who will introduce the first piece this afternoon.
Good evening. My name is Namiko Miller, and this monologue is based on the life of Frank B. Butler. Frank B. Butler was a civil rights activist from St. Augustine, and what he did in response to Jim Crow laws that prohibited blacks from enjoying the beaches that everybody else could enjoy is he built his own beach that African Americans could enjoy. So in 1925, he built Butler's Beach. And this piece is based on an interview that was done with his daughter in 1990, Minnie Mae Butler Edwards. And I hope you enjoy it. It is called My Papa.
So, you come to interview me, eh? Sit down, sit down. Now, I know you want to ask me questions about my life, but I'm too excited to answer any questions. You hear that Jacob Lawrence won a National Medal of Arts from President Bush? That's a big honor if you get it from the president. All us black people are so proud of Mr. Lawrence. You know he tells stories in his paintings, right? Yeah, he tells stories about Toussaint Louverture, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, John Brown, and the Migration series. All paintings tell stories, but these paintings tell our stories. Stories that need to be told. Now let me tell you a story that needs to be told. It won't be a painting because I can't draw a lick. This story needs to be told too. It's about my papa, Frank B. Butler. You know who he is? Well, he was born August 4th, 1885 in DuPont, Georgia, to Mary and Frank Butler Sr. My papa was probably 17 or 18 when he married my mom. Her name was Mimi, and she died when I was a baby. After my dad died, he left for DuPont, it being a little country town, and he lived there. He had some friends, younger boys, and my grandmother had a sister that lived in Fernandina. He first started working for my aunt and her husband. They had a pretty good-sized store there, and he picked up cutting meats and things like that. He was the butcher and the runaround boy. You're recording this, right? They had a little falling out or something, and he stopped working with his uncle and was working for a fish market. After working for Mr. S.E. Snyder, a Jewish person, he decided he wanted to go into business for himself. I think Mr. Snyder liked him so well as he found out he was so ambitious to try to do something for himself, and he just helped him. He opened a meat market and a grocery store. Now this is the best part on why I'm so proud of what my papa did to help the black folks. You see, he built a beach they could use because blacks weren't allowed to go on the St. Augustine beaches. This started because one day, a woman came down from New York, and she was staying at the St. Augustine beach. Her maid was black, and she took the white children out on the beach. You know, they arrested her for just doing her job? Anyway, that is what came into Papa's mind after having some place for black children and grown people to attend. You see, a lot of people visit Florida's beaches every year, but that privilege was restricted for many years by Jim Crow laws that prohibited black people from sharing those beaches with white people. My Papa borrowed his first money from Mr. Frank Upchurch to get the place from him. So he bought one portion of the beach. After buying that, he was able to sell lots and things off like that. Then he bought the other portion. I think this was in 1925 or 1926, somewhere along that time. My Papa had buses come in from Mississippi, Jacksonville, and Georgia because there were no beaches for blacks. Over time, he developed a residential subdivision, a casino, motel, and beach resort for us. By 1948, at least 11 black-owned businesses operated in the area, and my Papa's Butler's Beach was a thriving tourist attraction. This was the only beach between Jacksonville and Daytona that blacks were allowed to use. My Papa also encouraged blacks to vote and set up voting stations at his real estate office. And guess what? Butler Beach was all on the news in the 60s. Even though the beaches were desegregated and white folks were still mad at us, because Butler Beach was in the middle of St. Augustine Beach and Crescent Beach. They was beaches for the whites only. They didn't want nothing to do with us. They didn't even want us to be nowhere near them. It gets so bad, Martin Luther King came. He said St. Augustine was the most segregated city in America, and that he would fight segregation even if it took him all summer. All summer. Well, that man had plenty of time, but he was serious. So serious, they arrested him and throw him in jail. They call it the St. Augustine Civil Rights Movement because of the many rallies, meetings, and waitings that took place at beaches reserved for whites only. On June 25th, 500 whites broke through police lines and attacked about 75 demonstrators taking part in a wait-in. All of this led to the signing of the Civil Rights Act later in the year. So you see, my Papa started this movement that ended in the Civil Rights Act. Yeah, I'm proud. That's my Papa, Frank Butler. Didn't I tell you I had a good story to tell you? My Papa died in '73, but he will not be forgotten. Now, I hope you all excited to hear more stories, because we have some more to tell you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julian Valdivia, and I'm the author of the next piece that you're about to hear, performed by Stan Richardson. The piece is called Die or Go, and it's about the far too often untold stories of Florida sharecroppers in the 1920s and Florida ag extension workers. So I hope you enjoy this piece. Thank you.
Josiah. Well, back in 36, that's 1936, it was very rough. We was treated very cruel, working for very low wages, 75 cents a day. Happened a lot in Gadsden County. But I know about this one particular place because I was living on it. The man would sometimes whip men, I would say, as far as I know, without a cause. He didn't own the land, but he was the overseer of that plantation. And it wasn't just that he didn't like me. Some things went on in that place. And well, he whipped the man mighty bad. My own personal friend. He whipped him. Gave him a whipping with an actual whip. They carried him on down to the whipping grounds, a place they called Campbell Field. They would take people that worked on the plantation and they'd take them out and dress them up. That's what they called it, dressing you up. keeping you in your place. But the overseer, he asked me one day where my friend was. I told him, you know where he at. You ought to send a doctor down there. That man can't work in this condition. So the overseer did send a doctor down there, and my friend got up. He got up before he could work again, and he ran away, never to be seen again. Once he left, the overseer said it might be me next time. You see, I had come to talking about things I didn't like, and it got back to the man by some means. So he came to me and questioned me, and he told me he was going to whip me like a horse. You see, a horse, you whip a horse. Horse don't whip, don't hit back. I looked him straight in the eye. I said, no, you ain't. You ain't going to whip me. You whip me, people going to die. Eventually, they called me into the office. Well, the overseer called me in, and he called me in there. I had never been in there because that's where all the white folks sit down. I imagined that was his aim to whip me, and he come in and he said, have a seat. I said, no, sir. That's where y'all sit at. I don't sit in there. Everything I'm going to get is going to be through this pigeonhole. See, they had a little pigeonhole like they do at the post office. So I didn't go in. I could see there was two of them in there, and one of them was sitting right at the door, and the other one was sitting behind the door. They was talking to me, and I presume if I went in there, one of them was going to slam that door, and they'll have the ups on me. So I didn't go in. I backed out. So then I knew I had to leave. Now, the night after I moved over my furniture, I had to go over to my home in order to get my cow. I walked that cow as many as 9 miles. I wasn't worried that the overseer might find me. I wasn't trying to hide. I had my pistol that night. But he never showed up. And after we talked in that factory that day, and in that office, he never did come to where I was no more. I went to him and I told him. I said, I was going to move myself and my family away. I told him, you try and stop me, and one of us is going down. My mind was made up. Die or go. That was my motto. Die or go. Funny enough, after that, I and the overseer got to talking after he lost his job. Me and him sat down and we talked one morning. That was years later. I guess about 20 years. No, about 12 years. About 12 years later, he told me, he said, you know, I wanted to whip you then, but you wouldn't take no whipping. I said, no, I ain't taking no whipping. Even so, my parents had prepared me for all that. After leaving the plantation, I ended up in Hamilton County as an ag extension worker. My title was Negro County Agent, and I worked with local farmers and the youth. You got to understand, though, while I was off the plantation, and African Americans still had to know what the rules were. Segregation was very real. I felt it every day. Blacks couldn't even join the Florida Farm Bureau. I remember we had a group of black farmers there. They wanted to join the Farm Bureau, and they told them they didn't have any blacks in Florida's Farm Bureau. Because of that, black farmers didn't have supervision or anything. A lot of them thought the loans from the FSA, the Florida Farm Security Administration, was government money, and they could use and not pay back. My daddy used to borrow money from them, and in my dad's case, there was this woman involved. She was trying to get him to borrow more money than he needed, and he wouldn't. And she said, you know what color you are? He said, yeah, I'm black. She said, no, you ain't, you yellow. You yellow and you're scared to borrow. He said, I'm not borrowing more money than I can pay back. A lot of families lost their land because of stuff like that. But if you want to know the truth, I didn't think I would ever live long enough to see integration. I had a man, he had a red neck, a stone red neck. That man told me, he said, you see, I'll tell you what was going to happen. The time I was building from him as an office, and then the county decided where they was going to build me my own office. I wasn't going to say nothing to him because I was getting me a new office. That's just a waste of money, he said. And in a year or two, everything's going to be integrated anyhow. And I told him, I said, well, it might be, but you and I, we won't live to see that kind of integration. And I don't know what he's doing now, what happened to him, because he killed himself once it started happening.
Hello, my name's Henry Alvarez, and the performance you're about to see I created based on the civil rights movement in St. Augustine between 1963 and 1965. I used oral history interviews from Dr. Robert Haling, Audrey Nell Edwards, Joanne Anderson, and excerpts from Reverend Ralph Abernathy's book, And the Walls Came Tumbling Down. I hope you enjoy it, and also the experiences in hate and violence that these individuals went through is largely representative of the entire community and their experiences. Thank you.
St. Augustine to me was a very nice town to live in. Washington Street was our main street that had all the black businesses. When we started in the movement, we didn't start off picketing or demonstrating. We would go down to St. Paul's A&ME Church and sit around and just talk about what we were going to do, you know?
I lived on the west side of town. Audrey lived on the north, and things started for me when I asked my mother's permission to go and participate, and they, of course, said yes. So I went over to my sister's house every day, and that's how I got hooked up with them.
But Dr. Haling, he was our advisor, youth advisor, and he just motivated us to want to make a difference.
I had decided to move to St. Augustine to open a dental practice, and the young people came to me and asked, would I consider being the advisor to the NAACP Youth Council? Naturally, I had no reason not to, so I said, yes, I would.
I had seen all the young people gather up at the church down the street from me, so I said, I'm gonna go down there and see what they're doing. But all they was doing was gathering. We had realized that it was time to do something. So a group of us decided that we would go downtown and sit in.
I guess we was just tired of going with the signs. We wanted to make a difference. Just go in, sit down, and ask for service.
We went down St. Francis Street and turned down Washington Street. And as we were going down, the barber came out and said to us, where y'all going? We said, we're going to sit in. He said, who told y'all to sit in? Don't. Where are those picket lines? We said we left them at the church. We're going to sit in.
Our perspective was we just wanted to go on in and sit down, and I guess the local NAACP wanted a little more time. But for us, it was like we need to go in there, sit in, and ask for service. Mm-hmm. And when we did, we met our adversary who told us they don't serve niggers here, and that we needed to leave or be arrested.
But we continued sitting at the counter, and they said, we told you if you don't leave, you will be arrested.
We was unlawful guests. We were undesirable guests. We were trespassing, and if we didn't leave, we would be carried to jail. And that's just what happened.
When we were taken down to the jail, they hadn't put us in cells yet. So all 16 of us were just there singing.
We had no sense of fear because we were all together as a group.
At first, it was fun. We had all of us just singing and clapping because we knew we were fitting to leave. But then that didn't happen. We went to court the next morning, and that's when everything spiraled out of control.
The judge had a petition for our parents to sign stating we wouldn't demonstrate until we were 21 years old. And of course, we said, no, don't sign. We was 2 days in jail. Then it was a week, then 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, then finally to our reform school.
But Joanne and myself, we seen our mother's pain when they came up to that school and seen our bloody knees. We had to wax and buff the floors until you could see your face in them. If they weren't not right, you got to do it all over again.
Being locked up for so long in isolation once we arrived to that school, we were 77 days in jail. And we was 52 days at that school.
Dr. Haling made us feel like we were doing something right. Regardless to whether he gave us his permission to do it, he still came and stuck by us and said, "I'm with you all regardless. I'm going to be with you all to the end."
The NAACP felt that they couldn't support a large, full-fledged movement down in St. Augustine, so that meant for the time being that we didn't have support from a national organization. The young people were determined not to allow anybody to put a damper on their activities. We had decided to reach out to Dr. King and Reverend Abernathy of the SCLC to see if they could help us out.
Dr. Haling had sent for us when Dr. King came down to St. Augustine. He was sitting on a little plastic red couch. He was leaning back, and Reverend Abernathy, he was sitting over there in the corner, and Dr. King was kind of sitting, kind of leaning with his hat kicked to the side. When we walked in, he got up and said, "Oh, I know about you young people. Job well done. I'm so proud of you."
You see, the SCLC was always on the lookout for localities that had particularly harsh regimes, cities that were oppressive beyond the ordinary limits of Southern society. So we sought out St. Augustine, or to be more precise, St. Augustine sought out us.
Our main request at the time was a biracial committee to give the aggrieved black citizens a chance to air their grievances before a formal city board. We had enumerated things like allowing blacks to take the police examination so that they could qualify for employment. At that time, other than janitorial and maid service, no blacks worked in City Hall.
At this point, the NAACP removed Dr. Haling from his position with the local chapter, perhaps because local white leaders blamed him for the violence and because the organization had in turn judged him guilty by association.
The city and the powers that be claimed that I inflamed the atmosphere of the community by saying that I was going to shoot first and ask questions later. But it was my house that was shot up in the middle of the night, killing my dog and almost killing my pregnant wife. And it was me and a few other good men who were captured by the Klan during one of their mass rallies, beaten mercilessly, and stacked like firewood on the stage where we waited to be burned alive. I had said I would protect my life and that of my family with all the vim, vigor, and vitality at my command. Now, if that sounds like shoot first and ask questions later, then I have nothing else to say.
But statements of that sort only help in working against us. While your anger is warranted, only through the use of nonviolence would the indignation of the entire country be stirred up in our behalf. Now was the time when we most needed to practice restraint, when violence had already made the national news and the eyes of the nation were on St. Augustine.
They were horrible here, and we never would have thought. We all thought everybody loved one another, that everybody just got along, until we decided that we wanted to integrate and go sit at the counter. No. Then they really went completely crazy. They wanted to kill up all of us.
And the leader of the Klan element here was Haas Minucci, who operated under the guise of the Ancient City Gun Club. How this city could hold a man like Haas Minucci, who was a convicted moonshiner of questionable character, in higher regards than me, a U.S. Air Force veteran who served honorably as an officer, is beyond me.
Martin and I decided to take on the burden of the campaign ourselves by seeking arrest. It was easy enough in St. Augustine. All we had to do was go over to the Monson Motor Lodge, stroll into the dining room, and ask to be served.
I had no intention of going to jail again. But at the church, Dr. King turned to me and said, "I want my little hero to come and go with me in my group." And you can't say no to Dr. King. Not that I want to. So I went back to jail.
The proprietor told us blacks could not be served in his establishment and asked us to leave. We refused, and he called the police. The whole process took less than an hour, and our arrest made the evening news.
I was standing there. I had my little purse. I was dressed, boy, I tell you. We went up, and Dr. King said, "We'd like to enter to be served." And James Brock, the owner of the Monson Motor Lodge, said, "Didn't I tell y'all I wasn't going to? Why y'all keep bothering me?" And then he called the police, and those cars was pulling up, putting us in, throwing us into the cars. They threw Dr. King in the car with the dog, and the dog loved Dr. King. He kissed him.
When word came that we had actually invaded an all-white swimming pool, they quickly used the occasion to denounce us as outside agitators and to ask us that we leave the community, as if the problem were the demonstrations themselves and not the injustices that had provoked the demonstrations.
The federal government had appropriated nearly $400,000, of which $350,000 would be used for their year-long anniversary celebration, much of it centered around the old slave market. Yet, in a city of 20% of the population being black, not one was appointed to any of the committees involving this celebration itself.
They had agreed to consider the idea of a biracial committee precisely because we were there, marching down their main streets, affronting their tourists, embarrassing them nightly on the evening news.
We met with the city's secretary and her tape recorder. The city manager nor the commissioners showed up, and nobody from Washington stayed as promised. We had been outmaneuvered and out-manipulated again.
And we had no intention of leaving, and we told them so. But we did make a counter-proposal. We would stop demonstrations for 1 week if they would appoint a biracial committee immediately. It was only much later that we learned the truth. There was no biracial committee. Governor Byron had simply lied to the press and to the public.
I earned my citizenship beyond being a natural-born Floridian. But as a veteran officer of the United States Air Force, I just feel that I don't have to bow or take second place to anyone. And I shall try to educate my two grandsons along the same line that when you're right, stand up for your rights and do not offend or belittle anyone else.
We just didn't want to go to the back door all the time. You want to be able to sit in the front seat like everybody else. You want to be able to sit at the counter and not have to go to the window. You want to sit at the front of the bus, not in the back. Dr. Haling encouraged us in that way. That we could deserve more. We, everybody, deserve the Constitution.
I can say with certainty that we learned to be more cautious and less trusting during our confrontations in St. Augustine, specifically with Sheriff Davis and Hans Manussi. These lessons applied in Selma and everywhere else. They were valuable in preparing us for a much more violent future.
St. Augustine, to me, remains the same. They gave you a little and then snatched it right back. I feel like with the civil rights movement and the part we played, made a huge difference to a certain extent. But it also made us lose a lot of our history, and that's the hurting part of it all.
I make frequent visits back to St. Augustine. Some say that I'm crazy, and what have you, because we still see Confederate flags and everything, and we know there's a racist element in the city today. It's just that people with hatred, within their hearts. God created me brown and you a different color. It doesn't require for you to have something I can't have. We're all here and deserve the same thing.
This next piece is called It's Not Going to Be Easy. It explores the way older women participated in and supported active protest of the civil rights movements in St. Augustine and Ocala.
I got up one morning. I imagine it was after 12 o'clock. I got up to go to the bathroom and I saw a light over there. I walked somewhere, I imagine it was in the foyer, and I went up some stairs and I looked and I saw a state trooper's car parked behind Dr. Halen's office. I came out to the foyer and I looked across the street into the parsonage and I said to May, oh, May was my friend who lived next door. And I said, May, I said to her, I said, May, I saw a cop's car parked in your driveway. And she said, Ladybug. She called me Ladybug. And she said, yeah, that car's been parked there ever since Dr. King left. And I said, why? And she said, well, they've been parking there every morning, the state trooper in your yard. And I said to the state trooper, well, what you been doing there? And he said, well, I've been coming here to see about you. And I said, you've been coming here to see about me? Why? And he said, well, I've been coming here to look for about you and God in your house. And I looked at him and said, why? And he said, because of the movement. And that's when I became afraid. Well, you see, I've been looking at the movement on the television at Selma and all of those other places, and I thought about it, and I said, well, I never thought about that happening here in St. Augustine because we've always been such a close-knit community. And then I saw all the viciousness and the meanness happening, and then all of it coming out. And I thought about it happening for a long time.
I wanted to become, a physical therapist or do something in the medical field. But when I went to Virginia Union College, Frank Pinkston was a senior at Union, and he was also a very good football player. And then he received his bachelor. He enrolled in theological seminary at Union. So, as I said, he was a senior and I was a freshman. He was an outstanding athlete. I would go to the game with my friends, and I would see him and, around campus, and I don't know, I guess one thing led to another, and we met, and we fell in love, and we got married. Instead of a physical therapist, I became Mrs. Frank Pinkston. So then, we were married in December of 1958, and of course, after that, babies came. Well, 2. I got pregnant, and then I had to stay at home. I got pregnant with our first son, and I went to stay with my parents. That was the end of my protesting, so I was not really on campus when they were having the meetings and so forth. I really don't know about the sit-ins. Even though my father knew and my mother knew, they didn't tell me. Now the sit-ins, what year was that? That was in 1960. I think it was about February 20th. That was when the students first went to Thalheimer's, and they had to sit in. And then 2 days later, after having been told not to come back, they did go back, and that's when they were arrested. 34 students, I think they called them the Richmond 34, were arrested. And at that time, I was in Chase City, Virginia, and that night I was watching television and I saw on the news. On the news, I saw Frank being arrested and placed in a police car. And that's when my father and mother told me that they knew about it, but they had promised Frank that they wouldn't tell me because he didn't want me to be upset because Frank Jr. was born on February 28th. So you can see how close these things were together. But at first, when I saw him, I was shocked. I was shocked, but I was not surprised. I felt after the initial shock, I was very proud of him, and I was proud of the other students. I was just sorry that I was not there to join them because I'm sure if I had been in school at that particular time, I would have been in that group. But I had a baby instead.
Back in the day, Mr. Martin Luther King Jr. used to stay with me. And I tell you, he was not the type of person that would come in and demand this or that. Whatever you fixed for him, he liked it. Now, when I would come home from work, I would fix him a steak. Well, I would fix him a T-bone steak. And I would make mashed potatoes, tossed salad, a fresh roll. Now, that was too heavy for me that time of night, but I would make it for Martin Luther King. And so before I would leave for work the next day, I would say, Martin, what you want me to set out for you before I leave for work? And he would say, don't worry about it. Just make me a pitcher of tea. You make the best tea in the world. So, before I left for work, I made him 3 pitchers of ice cold tea, and I put them in the refrigerator. And don't you know, when I came home from work, it was 3 empty pitchers of tea sitting on the table. And so, well, I don't know or remember how many times he stayed with me. Well, I remember 2 times. And one of the times I was sick. But the 3rd time he stayed with me, I remember. Yes, sirree, because that was the time I got to see him.
Frank was always a person. He just had this quality about him. When he talked, you could just tell. I just felt he was a person that was destined for something great. He was very optimistic. He had a lot of self-confidence, and he had the ability to just sort of pull people in. That's why I wasn't surprised how big he got when we moved to Ocala. Well, at first, I thought Ocala was small and segregated. And I'll tell you the truth, and I know this will go on record. Marion County ain't the best. It's not the best county in the world to live in, but it became my home. And Frank emerged as the civil rights movement in, I think it was about 1963. The thing about it that was surprising to me was that most of the women were the ones who were really, really outspoken and supported the movement. And the men, for some reason, in my opinion, some of them were a little reluctant to get involved. Maybe it could be because a lot of them had jobs, that the white man, quote unquote, could terminate at will. I think that's one of the reasons a lot of the men were a little reluctant at first. Because, the jobs that they had, and they knew they had families to support. He was really good with young people. Frank organized them, and they wasn't afraid. They was arresting them and putting them in jail, parents going down and getting them out and all that stuff. And then they would start threatening about blowing up church and doing something to our people.
It really was an opportunity for me having met Martin Luther King. Well, because my husband and my son was heavy into the movement. Dr. King looked at me and he told my son, as they went out one night during the demonstrations, he said, Roland, he said, you didn't hit nobody, did you? He said, well, I kind of rubbed up against him a little bit. And he said, well, I forgive you. because that's the vision that's in your mama coming out in you.
We would have mass meetings at Covenant Baptist Church. That was his father's church. Those meetings were held sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, and the church would be packed inside and people would be standing on the outside. When we had all this meeting thing going on and everything, he was prompt, spoke up, stood up for what was right and righteous. And most people with common sense admired him and worked with them and did a lot of things like that. Frank was very serious about our movement being a non-violent movement. Our meetings were when the community came together and we listened to learn what activities had taken place during that week. We would be given reports about whether or not anyone was arrested or if there were any problems. And then we'd have a sermon from Frank that would tear the roof off of Covenant Missionary Baptist Church. And that wasn't once in a while, that was every week. When we left there just feeling empowered. We were like, we can do this. It's not going to be easy, but we can do this.
King was an amazing person. He really was. He never interviewed anybody. He was always meditating. Before he talked to anyone, he meditated. They would come to that door and they said, Doc, minister, so-and-so is here to see you. He said, okay, and he sat there. And when he heard the person coming, he would come up to that person. He would raise his head and he would sit there and he would walk to the door. He was amazing. And we all used to come out to my house. Yes, everybody would come to my house. And then my house was the headquarters at that time, day and night. You could find him there. He would have everybody come and report to my house, and the reporters would call him on the phone, and they would be talking to him, and he would sit in the kitchen, and you didn't know what he was saying to him because he would talk that soft. He would talk that soft, and you didn't know what he was saying to him, and he would sit on the porch, and we both would sit on the porch, and the Klan would drive by, and we would sit back on the porch, and we would wave to them as they drove by. And we weren't afraid. I was never afraid until he left. And then I was afraid.
Everyone, my name is Summer Plisco, and I'm the playwright of this next piece. This piece was crafted by Oral Histories about Lincoln High School that was here in Gainesville. Each of these characters were based on several different oral histories, so they all represent a bunch of different people. These interviews were about Lincoln High School and why it was so important, what happened to Lincoln when we started integrating the schools here, and what it means to be a terrier. Enjoy.
Well, this is my diploma from when I was going to Lincoln. Oh, you know, I still got my yearbook. The Terriers. Ooh, I haven't heard that in a minute, the Terriers.
You know the Terriers are known for their fearlessness and tenacity.
Yeah, that's why we were called that. You know, I know. Well, the people who went to Lincoln, we had to be fearless.
Now I know we were fearless on the field. Everybody wanted to play some football.
Oh, across the state, it was a very envied school. Everyone wanted to beat Lincoln.
Yeah.
It was always because they wanted to see our band. If the crowd was, let's say, in a big uproar, stuff like that, the minute Lincoln band hit the field, it got attention.
Oh, yes. Ooh, Lord. You know what? We'd always have a good routine at halftime. I mean, the game itself was meant a lot. And you had bragging rights for a full year if you win.
That's right.
But at halftime, oh, no, that meant a lot. Let me tell you.
It was the whole show, from start to finish.
But you right. The Terriers were fearless and feared. You know, there was Howard in Ocala. They feared us. There was Union Academy in Palatka. They feared us. Mabane. Yeah, all those feared us. Yeah. And then, you know what? And then when we went to Daytona and Palatka, we had to beat them twice. You had to beat them once on the field, and then you had to beat them trying to beat them off of the field, trying to get to your vehicle because they wanted to fight you.
Oh, that's right, but it was always like that for us. Not just when we played them other schools, but every single day. I remember when we walked to school, we had to pass the Buchholz bus from our neighborhood on the way to Lincoln. And when that Buchholz bus passed us, they spat on us while we was walking to school.
But then when we got to Lincoln, we were home.
That's right.
They taught us at Lincoln to do better than that.
Sure.
To do better than them.
You sure did. You know, and we were not taught at Lincoln like they say. We were educated.
That's right.
You see, when you're taught, it's between the covers of the book. But when you're educated, it's between the covers of the book and outside of the book, too.
That's right.
It's because the teachers, well, they really cared. See, when I started teaching at Lincoln, I wanted to try to change things in the teaching situation. The textbook that we had to teach from was a textbook students at Gainesville High had used. When they get new books, we would get the old books handed down to us to teach from.
We always had them hand-me-down books. People sometimes strategically tore out the pages. Sometimes the books was written in.
And sometimes it had messages in those books that were directed at you, directed at us. And one time I had a book and I saw, "To the nigger that gets this book, I hope you have the intelligence to comprehend what's in this book."
Because they knew that those books were going to be passed down to us.
See?
And I had to teach government and history of this country from those books. But the thing is, what I was supposed to be teaching from these textbooks was not reality. Not the reality that was really happening.
No.
You know, they didn't even mention people like Frederick Douglass.
No. Yeah, they didn't even mention blacks. The black people that mattered, that changed history. You know what? We had to talk about those presidents like Jefferson, and you had to talk about Andrew Jackson, Abe Lincoln, and George Washington. But we didn't talk about George Washington Carver. Nor Booker T. Washington.
None of that was in the history book because the history book wasn't written to teach about people like that. So I wrote a new lesson plan and I gave it to the white supervisor on social studies to approve. When the civil rights movement came about, I was teaching about pressure groups at the time. So I was teaching my students about pressure groups textbook left out. The SNCC, the CORE, the NAACP. One day while I was teaching my students this, the supervisor of the school came into my classroom. And you know what she did? She went back and told the superintendent that I was teaching subversive activity.
You were just teaching the facts?
I said that. I said, don't tell me how to teach. I said, I'm teaching the facts. And I told the administrator point blank, no one in this room has more knowledge about history of government than I did. Oh, I thought I was going to be fired right then and there. But instead of getting rid of me, they moved me out of the classroom and moved me to the front offices.
He became the dean just so that he wouldn't be directly involved with teaching the students. But you see, that's how much our teachers cared.
You know what? The teaching never stopped. Educating never stopped. Every day there was something to remind you that one day you had to be better than the next guy because of how you looked or who you were.
And that we were bright. We weren't dumb.
No. Well, that too was a stereotype that we had to fight back then because we always was compared to white kids. Back in the day, in 1960s, if you were white, you were supposedly smart. If you were black, you wasn't supposed to be smart. And that was always so crazy to me.
Me too. You know, when Lincoln closed and we went to different white high schools, I went to Gainesville High School, and we actually were ahead of those students. We were ahead of those students.
You know what? We find all these years it's been drilled that the white kids were supposed to be much smarter than us. And when we get over to the white schools, we find out that we had been bamboozled.
It's really a credit to the teachers of how they cared, how good they were.
What they were telling us was that you are somebody. Yeah.
See, the one thing about when I went to Lincoln, it wasn't integrated.
It was a segregated school.
Yeah, and you would think that that's not a good thing, but believe me, it was. And I don't mean to come across that I'm against integration.
It's just that Lincoln was a hub for the black community. Everything took place virtually at Lincoln.
The pride was there. It was where things happened.
So when you start talking about the things that occurred after integration, we began to lose our identity. We began to lose a lot of the identity that got us to this point.
You know, I said that one time, and this girl goes to me. She says, a little white girl, wait, you don't like integration?
No.
She did not get that integration was not what blacks asked for. We asked for separate, but equal.
For 10 years. Just give us separate but equal. Just give Lincoln the same books and whatnot you give the other schools.
There was always separate, but there was never an equal.
You know what? I think about during my time in high school, I never attended school for 9 months. Now, white kids, they attended school for 9 months. I attended school for 8 months because I was expected to be available to work the farms at harvest, which I refused to do.
And then, of course, the closing of Lincoln came, 1969 or 1970, right around there.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, there were big protests over closing Lincoln. It was a bitter closing.
Mm-hmm.
Students decided that they would just knock down lockers, raid the campus, and destroy it because, that was just another one of those unequal things for blacks. Our school had to be closed.
Lincoln High was top of the line as far as high schools considered in Florida,
But integration came and changed that.
we had to close a beautiful community. That closeness that we had created, it was gone.
I felt like we lost something.
Identity.
The value of history.
So many things like personal respect for each other, family.
Oh, we just lost so much of our time. And now I realize that time doesn't stand still. You know, you've got to progress to move forward. But we lost the very core, the fiber of those things that made us strong and when we began to integrate schools.
Even though we had teachers that was integrated.
Oh, yeah, with the white teachers, we got along fine. We never saw any color.
No. We had the utmost respect for our teachers, and we were close.
And Lincoln was a school where the teachers were close with your parents, too.
Yes.
Right.
Now, if we did anything wrong, word got around. Even the neighbors had the right to chastise us and then told our parents. And there was another beating when we got home.
But when we came up, we had what you call respect for your elders because of that. That's why I was so thankful for Lincoln High School, and I still am.
That love for Lincoln will always be there.
Well, still there's number one. Well, it's still for one reason. One, because the genuine loyalty that we have fostered amongst the students.
Number two, Lincoln was like a second home.
Number three, a number of kids would rather be at Lincoln because the conditions and atmosphere at Lincoln were probably better than the conditions at home.
Number four, it was instilled in us that education was a way to a better life. You were always told to get your education to graduate from high school.
Ooh, graduation was the icing on the cake, but they did so much leading up to graduation. Yeah. You remember you had your class night where you were presented with your class ring, and then we would do the class play.
And you had the terrier bark. That was the talent show.
And then after graduation, you would go on a class trip.
Oh, your homecoming was a highlight of the year for me. Woo! When we had to make the floats with those paper napkins, remember that?
Yes, and homecoming was the highlight for everyone in the black community.
Oh, yes. You know, it was standing room only at Citizens Field.
All all the Terriers would come back.
Oh, yeah.
We still have the desire to bring Lincoln back.
It's a school that needs to come back into existence, if you ask me. It just needs to.
Yeah.
And when I say that because of some of the problems that we're facing today in this society, especially in the African Americans.
If the environment of Lincoln could be recreated, it would help us tremendously. It would help this city tremendously, this country.
You know what? I look back on Lincoln High School, and sometimes now, I shed a little tear because I just love being at Lincoln High. And I'm a terrier. I'll never forget the spirit of the terrier.
Hello, my name is Madeline Bowman, and this next piece is called Bullets Don't Know the Difference. It's based on interviews from Black veterans who served in both World War II and the Vietnam War. And Jacob Lawrence himself served in World War II in one of the first integrated units. So I thought it was important to shine light on the racism that many Black servicemen faced overseas and the psychological effects of war. So please enjoy.
I got drafted in 1942. I waded ashore on Normandy Beachhead on my 22nd birthday. I'll never forget it. Now, that's important because I'll tell you what. When we arrived on Normandy Beachhead, the person in charge of supplies and things of that sort didn't know anything about us, didn't know anything about our being there or whatnot.
I was in the armed forces overseas during World War II. Now, I was in a place called Liege, Belgium. We were right under, I can't think of the address, the river. The most frightening time to me during my time in the service overseas was the Battle of the Bulge. That was frightening. Because originally, you know what? The Germans were not taking any prisoners.
Places where we lived, the bombings got terrible. You would hear bombs falling, late at night, literally devastating experience. Because, you wouldn't know if your building would be next.
That Emperor of Japan was meeting with President Roosevelt, and all that time he knew that they planned to bomb Pearl Harbor. What made us so mad, the United States was selling all scrap iron to Japan.
And then in the Philippines, we worked on roads, airstrips, and things that kind of stuff. And we would hear a lot of sirens out of the woods at night. And the Soviets would know where we were going on. It was still firing. And then they dropped the first atomic bomb on Japan, and they dropped the second atomic bomb on Japan. And right then we knew, when they dropped the second bomb, a few days after that, we knew we had to occupy Japan.
All the scrap iron you see loaded on them cars going north, shipping it over to Japan, selling it to the Japanese, and they making the bomb. Because we wasn't looking to go in the war when Japan... All they had to do was keep on coming, because the United States didn't have nothing. They didn't have nothing.
I was with the first troops to move in to occupy Japan. I didn't know Japan was so lovely. It was quite an experience.
About 4 months before I got out, I started having a crawling sensation in my head.
And there was no treatment.
The only thing that we got coming back was having our bags searched to make sure we weren't bringing back drugs or ammo.
When I was in Japan, it first started with me having nightmares and headaches, and they continued, and they put me on medication. Of course, no medication helped those nightmares.
But let me know a little bit in advance. That's the part I need to kick in.
There was no mental health treatment. There was nothing for us. Just go back and assimilate. We were really happy. Our time was up. I'm done. I'm going home. Had tears in my eyes. Thank God it's about time. I knelt down and I kissed the ground. So yeah, a lot of people didn't make it back. They didn't have a chance to kiss the ground. Just be back on their own turf.
But anything I say was segregated back in those days was rough, just because you had so many white people who would take full advantage of that of being superior to the other race.
I do know that sometimes the bus driver would tell you to go all the way to the back, and there would be no seats. That's why Rosa Parks, well, she wasn't going to go for that. And in the city buses and everything else.
Some of them was just as nice as can be. No, it wasn't all bad.
And let me tell you about the army I served in, the military. When we were in Virginia, they had prisoners of war. They rode those buses and sat where they wanted. They went to the theaters free.
Now, that was true. I risked my life to come back to a society that did not treat me the same as others. I was treated even less than the prisoners of war.
And when we trained under some terrible conditions there, being a segregated army, whenever we were going past to the city, the nearest one was Louisiana. When it came time to catch the bus or come back from Reveille, all black soldiers had to step aside and lure while they lured up all the white at the other end. You know, just had to wait. And oftentimes, we were late getting back to camp. Yes, because of those policies.
We always tried to get our dead out. We had about, I'd say, maybe 7 or 8 people that got ambushed, that got killed. Yeah. And we had to load them up, always use the term. We had to load them up like hogs. We had to stack them on top of each other, get our people.
There was a discrepancy in what the Constitution of the United States was saying. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, and all that business in the Constitution, what it said. And me fighting for the United States, and I had to pledge allegiance to that flag, and all of that. And then I was treated inhumanely. That prepared me because it gave me an insight to when I wanted to dig further and to try to change what was happening to me, what was happening in society to other black males in this community. Because I found out that this government, it was the law. And if you were to walk into a restaurant or walk into a white restroom, I would be breaking that law.
They would let the whites always go to town tonight and restrict the blacks going to the post. Tomorrow night, they would let the blacks go and restrict the whites in places over there. It was terrible.
But we always got the worst of every goddamn thing in terms of treatment, in terms of assignments.
Yeah, often the commanding officer would be some damn racist from the South someplace.
We had all white commissioned and non-commissioned officers who were going to this reception where we would go get our clothes and different things. And they ran us, we didn't walk, we had to run to the mess hall, everything on double time. Well, I guess it was something to do with training, getting more shape, you know? But the harsh talk was so nasty, you know? Some of them would call us Negroes, while some were nice about it.
Coming on down through Georgetown, South Carolina, being a little town, we stopped in there to get supplies. Well, before the bus driver made me get off the seat with this girl, and the white soldier and sailor made me sit back down. They forced me, pushed me down, and let me know that they were there with me. And they told that driver, you better go up there and drive the bus. Said she told him to sit down there. We're right here. He can't do anything to her. Said we all in this war together.
We had to pay, and we had to sit where they told us to sit. And Jackie Robinson, you know, he got into something about that.
Yeah, some of them were nice, but I didn't know a lieutenant from nobody else back in those days. And I had written my brother back. I said, man, don't volunteer and come to this army. But he just had to volunteer.
I had to ride in the back of the bus, even when we had the bus. So the segregation situation, and I couldn't figure out that I went overseas, risked my life to come back to a society that did not treat me the same as others.
We were in the same uniform, representing and defending the same country. That was terrible.
They said the World War II veterans started it. But we had had enough because them bullets didn't know the difference. They didn't know if we were black, white, and didn't care. And I got shot at just like everybody else.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I'm Brittany Caldwell. This piece is called From Colored to Black. I took some interviews from the Reynolds family and their experiences living in Rosewood. They were the first family to go back to Rosewood, the first black family after all of the stuff that happened in Rosewood over 100 years ago. Yeah, ish. So they have a really compelling story, and I just took their interviews and made some characters out of them. And they also lived in Marion County, so it kind of gives perspectives on both areas. And these are my actors. Thank you so much.
It's all right.
came here to Marion County. How was it out there in Rosewood?
Rosewood. We had some pretty bad times down there.
Ooh, when we first moved there, we needed all kinds of equipment, refrigerators, this, that, and the other thing. So we went up to what that store? What's the name?
West or Best.
Webb's.
Jeb's.
Yeah, Jeb's.
I knew it was something like that. Anyway, we went up there to this store and we was looking to purchase some refrigerators, everything you need for the house, all right? And we paid for it. And it must have been about a couple of months later, the proprietor came down to the house. Well, he said, well, Daddy, tell him what he said.
You know I'm getting some new supplies. I think we could bring your equipment down to you.
I said, okay. So he came down that day and he said, now before you get all excited, let me tell you this.
I sold yours, but I bought you another one.
He did what?
So did. I said, you did what? He said, I sold what you had, but I bought you this. And I told him.
Mama told that man, I didn't purchase that. I want what I bought. That's when I knew I had me a firecracker.
So he looking all crazy because he surprised us all get out that I said anything. But I wasn't happy, and we paid that man our money, and I said, you wanted me to have that, and I want what I bought.
I know that's right.
He also had our sales receipt on the side of the cash register, so everybody in town could see what we bought and how much it cost.
So I said, you know what? You just give me my money back. You can leave all these items here, but I still want my money back.
And to make sure that check was good, Mama done went down to the bank with that man.
No, he gonna say, you're a tough lady to deal with.
He don't know the half of it.
See, that's why we brought from our own peoples in Marion County.
And he was running for county commissioner. I said, you know one thing? I wouldn't vote for you anyway. You don't even know how to do business properly. You are phony. Here you go. No, here. I'm an upstanding individual.
Upstanding my behind. What he did to y'all wasn't right.
I said, let me tell you something. If you and your boys come down here in some white sheets, I'm gonna fill you all so full of holes you're gonna look like some Swiss cheese.
Oh, no. I don't belong to that organization.
Sure you don't. Well, let me just tell you this right now. If you come down here, you'll all be flat out looking like some Swiss cheese. So he left.
The fella would go out there and they would shoot deer or something like, and they would skin them and leave them in the road, so we would have to either go around them or whatever.
They would put rats, anything into our mailbox. Yeah, we had some pretty bad times down there.
Well, Marion County is not the Marion County it used to be either.
Sure ain't.
Marion County was a progressive county for black people. You know, Ocala was a place where we didn't have to mingle with the white section of town.
Yeah, we was colored at that time. We was colored people.
Sure was.
Since we're talking about it, I'm going to tell you, I've been 4 or 5 different things in my lifetime. I've been a Negro. I've been black. If there's one thing I am, truthfully and definitely, I am colored.
Even though, of course, they was using it derogatorily.
Yeah, I'm still colored, and I'll always be colored. But now it's this Afro-American thing they got me being now.
Ain't nobody in my family I can trace back to Africa.
So ain't.
Yeah, but somewhere along the line, some way back when, somewhere or another, we come from Africa. Because I'm brown-skinned, you know, they're going to say my people had to come from Africa.
Yeah.
What if they come from one of them Hawaiian islands, like Tahiti or something?
Because they brown-skinned, too.
Yeah. Anyway, like I was saying, a lot of people don't know.
Well, you probably don't know.
They don't know.
Listen, can I say what I'm trying to say? All right, now.
Well, go on in. Fine by me.
Okay. Now, in Marion County, everything we ever wanted was in the colored section of town. I mean, all the businesses. We even had the movie house called the Roxy Theater on Broadway. We didn't even have to go to the white folks theaters, because if you went to the white folks movies, they had you walk up the fire escape and sit up in the balcony, so we didn't go there.
We went to the Roxy.
And on Saturday.
When I was going to school there, we had a colored band.
Owned by colored people.
On the corner of Broadway and Magnolia Street.
There you go, right?
And on Saturdays, let me tell you.
You know, I don't know another colored bank in the state of Florida, but we had a colored bank in Ocala.
Sure did. All up and down Broadway was colored businesses.
Yes, sir.
Black-owned businesses. Businesses on Broadway.
You remember Scogan's?
Nuh-uh. On Saturdays, as I was saying, you could find everybody up on Broadway shopping. In Marion County, all the colored people knew each other. Everybody knew
You remember Scogan's?
And his Japanese wife.
What's her name? Hunky or Mookie or something like that. I forgot her name.
Fuji.
Yeah, Fuji. Yeah, I knew it was something like that. Yeah, we knew them pretty well.
Yeah, we knew everybody, and they knew us.
And Scoggins they were pretty nice too for our
and Fuji gave me a bunch of honey or something or other.
Are y'all done? I said the whole county and not just Ocala, because they would come to the woods to come to town. You would go up on Broadway and everybody is up there. I'm not joking.
All up in the middle, having a good time in the middle of the Broadway.
It's not like that anymore.
Nobody knows anybody anymore. It's not the same. And colored folks done changed.
Well, I know the white folks ain't changed. Everything's still the same. Rosewood. The history repeats itself.
Yeah, well, everybody's heard the saying that history repeats itself, right?
But they don't know about Rosewood.
7 days after Christmas, 1923.
7 days after Christmas, 1923, is New Year's Day.
When all the commotion started in Rosewood. When they started chasing all the people of color away.
Right.
And doing, whatever they wanted to do.
Nah, I said 7 days after Christmas, 1923, when the Rosewood Massacre started for a reason.
Because history repeats itself.
Not 1923, but 2003.
7 days before Christmas.
The only first people of color to move back to Rosewood was chased out 7 days before Christmas.
Which was the 18th of December.
2003. I remember because it's my grandbaby's birthday.
In 1977, I talked to Jim Kane to buy some land. I was looking for about 5 acres where I could raise some chickens or some hogs. Well, I won't be bothering nobody. So he took me to Rosewood. I didn't know nothing about no Rosewood.
I had never heard of the place.
And we went up, and not the road I usually take, but we went to another road, a back road. They came in from the back way. Brought me in, and when I came in, on both sides was number palmetto trees.
And palms are beautiful.
40 acres of palmetto trees.
40 acres?
40 acres at $400 an acre. I said, nah, all I need is 5 acres.
But he looked at it.
I wasn't gonna buy it. We got to his office, and I say, them 40 acres, would you take 300 acres for it? He said, no, I can't do that.
But then he come back and say, can you give me $500 down?
I had $3,500 in my pocket. But I said, will you take a check? An out-of-state check? So I wrote him a $500 check on the Bank of Washington, D.C. for them 40 acres.
In Rosewood, not knowing
nothing about it.
See, you heard that saying, 40 acres?
40 acres and a mule.
I had me 40 acres and a mule.
In Rosewood.
I did. But what I finally found out was the property I bought what once belonged to the colored people that the rich white people in Chieftain bought for taxes.
From when all the colored people ran away and they escaped from the massacre and all.
They left all that property.
And all the rich people in Chieftain bought that property down there. I learned this over the years as the years went by. But that's how I got to Rosewood. Now, I said all that to say what I said.
Get to the point, Daddy.
December 18th, 2003.
7 days before Christmas.
My grandbaby's birthday.
My brick home decided to catch itself afire and destroy itself.
Sure did.
Completely destroyed itself. I had nothing left in this world except the clothes on my back. No material, no nothing. Everything we had, even the money we had in the house burned up. Everything. 7 days before Christmas.
Get out of town.
Well, we had to.
Because I wanted to rebuild my house, and Levy County refused to give me a permit to rebuild my own house. My own house, my own land. And that's why I say history repeats itself. All this time gone by. We done went from colored to black. But ain't too much really changed but what they calling us.
Hey guys, so my name is Adrian Martinez and I'm a second year at UF. So the theme of Jacob Lawrence that I was really interested in was labor, and he had this whole series of paintings and it was called Builders. And so I was thinking, well, how did black students build community at UF? So I looked into the racial history of UF from its desegregation in 1958 to today, and I hope that it opens your eyes to something new. Know that most of this is verbatim, so these are real people's stories. I got to interview students who graduated in the 70s to current students today, and I'm really proud of it, and I hope you like it, so enjoy. Also, We Are the Boys is in it, so if you know it, sing along.
In all kinds of weather, we'll all stick together. But in all kinds of weather, we really don't all stick together. When I'm at UF, I don't feel like I'm a Florida Gator. But when I leave UF, I feel like I'm a Gator. I think it's because not everybody here knows that the university has problematic roots and that there's no actual acknowledgement of injustices on our campus, especially when it comes to the history of race.
When I would hear that song at the ball games, I pretty much ignored it. I wasn't the part of the old boys they were talking about.
I graduated in '74, but I never thought of myself as a Gator until 2005. I didn't really feel like a part of the school when I attended UF. It wasn't a welcoming place for black students.
All of my professors were white. Most were racist, treating me like I didn't belong, expecting us not to do well. There were Confederate flags around campus, and I would hear the singing of Dixie when I would walk to my classes sometimes.
Y'all, Dixie originated in the blackface minstrelsy of the 1850s, and it was the national anthem of the Confederate States during the Civil War. It was a common tune among collegiate bands in the South, including our very own Gator Band. It didn't end until 1973 under President Marston.
Hearing that song, the band playing it, spelling it out on the field, white students singing it, it just made me uncomfortable.
My first roommate was white, and when he saw me, he said, "Oh, hell no." Walked out, and I never saw him again. My dorm only had one black student per floor. Being black, you were always under the microscope. You were treated and scrutinized as if you didn't deserve to be here.
There were only 100 seats in the end zone for colored people at Florida Field. Out of those 46,100 seats at the time, there were only 100 seats designated for colored people. That's one black seat for every 461 white seats.
I was probably the only black face you would see in a sea of white students, but I wanted to see the football game.
I tried to go out for U.S. basketball team, but the SEC did not allow African Americans to participate. I was told that the only reason I was at this school was because the university was trying to reach the quota.
The Kappa Alpha House would scare the heck out of me when the Confederate flag would be out there, and they'd be in that Civil War garb and riding horses. The sense that there were these people riding around with a lot of malice towards us, that was very scary.
I remember sometimes late at night, the white students on my floor would have fights and throw their shit all over the bathroom, like their actual shit. And you know who was left to clean that up? The custodians who happened to be black.
One of my professors said, we darker-hued people, we were onlookers. He said we were onlookers in history, not participants. We didn't do anything worth studying. He said that darkness cannot be the subject of history.
Even though I went to one of the best schools in Florida, there was no acknowledgement that African Americans were attached to anything, in any way, to people who had made a positive contribution to the world's civilization. We were just onlookers, right?
UF desegregated in 1958, but there's a big difference between desegregation and integration. Now, I do think UF is a very diverse campus, but it's a matter of the whole idea of diversity versus inclusion. Do I think it's very inclusive? While there's a lot of progress, the University of Florida wasn't originally a space created for students of color.
White privilege is conditioned oppression. The fact that I have to be careful about speaking out about racism because I don't want that person that's oppressing me to feel uncomfortable is oppression. No matter what, I can't get any lower than a black American.
For 15 years of my life, I wanted to be an engineer when I grew up. That dream was killed the second day I was on campus. The white students had 350 or more points above my entrance score, and I got intimidated.
We were basically going up against white students, and we had always been taught that white students were always smarter, better, did hard academics, and the black schools got the secondary academics.
If you were black, you were supposed to know your place. And your place was not to challenge the supremacy status of white.
I wasn't there for the college experience. Extracurriculars, partying, I was there for the academics. I was there because I couldn't let them down, my family, my community. They worked so hard to give me a better life.
In the Gainesville black community, we were supposed to be, or we were seen as, uppity Negroes. It was a lot of pressure trying to live up to everyone else. We had to be successful.
It was an unforgivable sin for me to come here and not do well.
There were only 8 students from my high school that got accepted to UF. That was the first time any group of African Americans had come to UF in a group. We represented the rising youth black elite, and failure would have been an embarrassment to the entire black community.
Some black students never left campus. At the time, Alachua County was really racist. I remember I saw a sign at Depot that said, "Nigga, if you can read, run. If you can't read, run anyway."
Just remembering that jarring feeling of, all right, don't go far. As long as you're on campus, you can handle it.
But in reality, do we have any safe spaces on campus? Absolutely not. It was your dorm room or nothing. There was nothing on campus for us.
Because black students didn't feel welcome at the University of Florida, the Black Student Union was founded in 1968, 10 years after the desegregation of UF, and served as a voice for black students on campus. I didn't know about BSU's history or its existence before I came to UF. I assumed that being black and coming to college, it was like, well, you need to be in the Black Student Union. I've been a member of BSU for the past 3 years now, and I currently serve as the organization's president. Our mission is to create, challenge, and cultivate the future. Before coming to UF, I came from a predominantly white institutional background. Being a part of BSU was probably one of the first times I felt comfortable in my blackness.
When I went to UF, the Black Student Union was in existence, but it was very low-key. We modeled the BSU Constitution after the Black Panthers.
A seismic event the Black Student Union is known for is Black Thursday. Black students weren't happy with the experiences they had at UF, and Black Thursday is when these students came together to advocate for better black experiences.
Our parents paid taxes, and UF is a state-sponsored school. So we basically wanted to be accepted as having the rights to our piece of the university's efforts. On April 15th, 1971, at 12:45 p.m., about 50 of us marched straight to President O'Connell's office with a list of demands.
We just wanted 6 things. 6 initiatives to improve the campus climate for black students. Just 6 things.
1, admit at least 500 black students out of the 2,800 freshman quota each year.
2, establish a black cultural center.
3, hire a black administrator in academic affairs and recruit black faculty.
4, hire a black assistant manager in personnel.
5, hire black faculty to reflect the ratio of black students.
6, have fair and equal treatment of black brothers and sisters employed at UF.
Now, April 15th, 1971 was not the first time we presented these demands to President O'Connell. We have been trying to get some action at the administration for the past 18 months.
Now, Black Thursday was strategic. Everyone was assigned a task, and no one's task was supposed to cause them their place at the university.
Some 67 of us were arrested or suspended for staging our sit-in. Our amnesty requests were denied, so we held a rally where several of us submitted withdrawal slips in protest.
O'Connell was adamant that he wasn't going to create a black studies department. He wasn't going to set up an African American house or cultural facility. And any student that kept pushing that, he'd simply kicked from campus. It became clear that the university wasn't interested in entertaining a black cultural anything.
Over the next few days, black enrollment dropped significantly because more than 100 black students withdrew from the University of Florida.
Maybe it was from the dwindling of black enrollment or from all the protests, but as a coming together moment, O'Connell agreed to have an Institute of Black Culture, and that's how the IBC came to be. Black Thursday is one of the reasons why I very much value the social justice aspect of the Black Student Union, because it has been the forefront of change on this university for all people. how even the progression of black students translates to the progression of all marginalized students. Think of it this way. After the IBC came La Casita, and then the Multicultural and Diversity Affairs came to be, and now all those things are a part of the MCDA. This just goes to show that the progression of a community leads to the progression of other communities.
The Institute of Black Culture was officially dedicated on February 11th, 1972, almost 10 months after we organized Black Thursday.
The IBC was our safe haven. It was one of those places on campus that gave us a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose.
It was our home away from home for us black students moving through the University of Florida.
I used to go to the IBC to hang out when it was open, before its renovation started last summer. I miss it. I miss having the space. I remember that if you would walk in through the door, on the right there's usually a student assistant at the table, and it was actually very small because on the left you would have some high-top tables, and then you had a little sitting area over here with some computers, and in the back there was a kitchen. If you come back through the hallway, there's a living room area where there's a TV, and if you go up there's an upstairs space for students. To me, IBC means progress. It means space. And something I began to think more about is the importance of having space in our life. IBC is pretty much the only space that we had, and the opportunities that it has given us, a place to meet, a place to call home.
We raised hell. We got spanked. And y'all got some buildings. But the struggle is still not done.
Students face similar problems in 2018 that they faced in 1971. From nooses created and left in classrooms, the vandalization of artwork dedicated to highlighting Black history, racially charged hate speech written on classroom whiteboards, and even the presence of a white nationalist and supremacist last semester.
It is clear that the University of Florida is still not a safe space for students of color. It goes back to the whole idea of diversity versus inclusion. Diversity doesn't mean a damn thing if all you got is numbers.
We need to not be comfortable in our complacency. We can't be comfortable in our oppression, and we need to be proactive.
In this society, I've noticed that there is no respect for opposite opinion. But in order for diversity and inclusivity to ever work, there has to be some kind of mutual respect.
UF can progress towards inclusivity by acknowledging the social injustices of the past. There are so many barriers that need to be broken that many people don't even realize.
We have all these different folk here who see the world differently. Not necessarily better, not necessarily worse. But how can we learn if we don't even listen?
We have to continue fighting the good fight, and we have to be aware that although the structures may look different outwardly, if it's not changing internally, then nothing's really changed since the day of Black Thursday.